Hello everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so, of course, I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. In honor of May being Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, I have a couple of really fantastic recommendations for everybody today. These ones both center around the always fascinating and always fun topic of food. As always, these recommendations are available to you entirely for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card. So without any further ado, let's get to the recs. All right, both of today's recommendations are available via our AANHPI service, and the first of those is 2020's Coming Home Again. Now, Coming Home Again is this absolutely beautiful, brilliantly acted, super quiet narrative film that follows a young man named Chang-rae. He's a first-generation Korean American, and he ends up having to move back home to San Francisco in order to help care for his ailing mother. This film is absolutely beautiful. It's also incredibly relatable, regardless of your background. One of those things that I found particularly relatable is the concept of going home again because of an ailing relative. I think that's a fairly universal feeling, a lot of that we can all tap into. You know, even if we've never had to do so, we could understand the impetus to do so. Additionally, his relationship with his mother and all of the different complications, you know, I definitely felt, as a child who'd grown up in an Asian American household, I definitely felt a lot of the things that he was dealing with are emotions that I've dealt with, that other friends who come from similar backgrounds have dealt with, but at the same time, very, very relatable. Now, a big part of this film is the son's sort of feeling of filial piety, which is the virtue of exhibiting love and respect for one's parents, elders, and ancestors. And then all of the responsibilities that go with that. His feelings towards that concept are one thing, but then you get into the complicated nature of his relationship with his siblings because of that. You know, there are lots of arguments about who's the favorite child and why they're the favorite child, and you know, what you've done to honor your parents and how your choices have done so. And it's very, very interesting to watch those scenes unfold. I am an only child, so I don't have, you know, that sibling insight, but I could definitely see exactly why things snowballed into some of the arguments that they snowballed into. But definitely at the heart of this entire film is Chang-rae's relationship with his mother. We get glimpses of what it was before and things that were said and things that were done to sort of put him in the situation he's in at the very beginning of the film. But then we also see this way that these things evolve, how our relationship with our parents changes when we become adults, especially when we don't see them every day, when there's a good expanse of time in between those moments, when you do bond with them. And Chang-rae and his mother are definitely in this sort of nebulous area where they're trying to figure out who they are now in this relationship, because he's no longer this little boy who is going to follow every instruction, who is going to do these things simply because, and it's adjustment. And the two of them getting to know each other in that new world and that new way is really, really kind of incredible and incredibly moving too, because we know where his mother is going with her health. And one of the anchors of this evolution of their relationship is food. You know, food is really, really a touchstone for every culture. But as someone who comes from an Asian American background, I know exactly how important it is and how so many things center around food, center around the preparation of it. And watching how these roles are starting to shift in this movie, because we hear Chang-rae talk about these dishes and these foods that his mother had made for him when he was a child, and we see him start to learn to make them and then start to really make them for her instead. And the care and the love that is all expressed in that. in ways that they will never say in words, because that's simply not culturally done. They can show it and they can share it and they can express it in this way. And it's just beautiful. I'm not going to lie. I definitely cried at least a couple of times during this movie. And it's not one to watch when you're looking for something light and fluffy. It really, really isn't. But it is one to watch when you want this exploration of a relationship between a son and his mother, a boy and his siblings, a young man really trying to find out who he is and really what his identity means. It's just a really, really multifaceted and beautiful film, and I absolutely recommend it. I'd not been familiar with it at all before I started looking for movies to recommend today, and I'm so glad that I stumbled upon it. It really made me think about the way that my mother prepared foods for me and how those kinds of things shift over time as well. So definitely recommended. Beautiful movie, Coming Home Again, available on Canopy. Okay, my other recommendation for today is this delightful, fantastically fun documentary that I think absolutely everyone who considers themselves a foodie or someone who's interested in American history should 100% watch, and that is 2014's The Search for General Tso. So General Tso's chicken is one of those dishes that I think most people in the US are probably at least familiar with as far as terminology goes. It is on pretty much every single Chinese American restaurant menu you're going to find, whether we're talking about some incredibly seedy, low budget strip mall joint, or we're talking about some high, fanciful haute cuisine restaurant. General Tso's is something that's sort of like a touchstone at this point. And what I find fascinating is it's not really something that a lot of people in China would have been familiar with, certainly not as actual Chinese food. And how this particular dish has evolved from when it started to today is also really interesting. But what I love about this documentary is that not only does it trace the origins of General Tso's chicken, and, why it's become so popular, but it also just sort of traces Chinese American cuisine in the US from its very beginnings. And how did we end up with so many small town Chinese restaurants where the population of Asian people might be that one family that runs that restaurant? It really is sort of an absolutely fascinating jaunt through American history. And everything that they touch on is interesting and has this little bit of familiarity because it talks about dishes that we've all heard of, even if we've not eaten them, and why those dishes were able to make the inroads that they did. And how when you look at the landscape of what is actually Chinese American cooking versus Chinese cooking versus American cooking, it's really, really fascinating how we've sort of interwoven so many of these elements. It's just fascinating, all of the history that is so intrinsically tied to all of these reasons why things happened. I had no idea before watching this that Richard Nixon's trip to China really sort of shifted certain viewpoints on what we think of as Chinese cooking today, and how just watching Nixon's state dinner affected the kinds of foods that were growing popularity-wise here in the US. It's so fascinating. I love things like that. And parts of it are really, really fun, but parts of it are also sort of weirdly heavy because you understand why certain stereotypical viewpoints affected the Chinese American community the way that they did, and why the results were what they were. I don't want to give away too much because there are so many fantastic little pops of surprise throughout that I thought were part of some of the most fun elements of this particular documentary. But if you do happen to like this kind of food filming and you are interested in Chinese cuisine, there's another movie as well available on Canopy, and that's called Soul of a Banquet, the matriarch of modern Chinese cooking. And that one follows Cecilia Chang, who started the Mandarin, which is a super, super famous Chinese restaurant back in the day. And it follows sort of when she was going through closing the business, how she was, going through and preparing this one particular dish and one particular banquet, I mean. And that's also a really, really fascinating documentary, though a little less lighthearted. I mention it in particular because Chang is interviewed for the Search for General Tso. But other little tidbits and anecdotes that are revealed, like rivalries between different chefs that I didn't realize, how different elements of Western cuisine then influenced this Chinese American version. And it's just, like I said, it's a fun one, and it's also really interesting, and it's one that I think we can all relate to simply because it talks about dishes we've all heard about at the very least. And then it also sort of talks about how Chinese American cooking has managed in some ways to influence some aspects of Chinese cooking too. So this ever evolving relationship and cuisine is just, I don't know, it just really, really resonates. It's really enjoyable. So if you're looking for something fun with history, with food, definitely check out The Search for General Tso's. You won't regret it. Definitely one of my favorite movies from the recent past. All right, so those were my 2 recommendations for this week. If you have any recs for titles that would sort of fit with this particular theme, please, please, please pop those in the comments below. If you have any recommendations for themes that you'd like me to cover in the near future, definitely share those. Always looking for help with that. As always, thank you so, so much for joining me. I love putting these together, and I do hope that you will find these particular titles to your liking. But if you don't, make sure you check out all of our streaming services. There are literally thousands of films and television series that are available for free with your library card. So make sure you check those out. So that is today's episode. Again, thank you so, so much for joining me, and hopefully I will see you next week. Bye-bye.